Hello and welcome to this episode of Standard Deviation, my column and video series. I'm TCA Sharad Raghavan and I'm going to be speaking to you about the new Hindu rate of growth that India is facing and how it's just not enough. But before we start, I had an appeal to make before you, which is please do subscribe to ThePrint. It allows us to do a lot of the ground reporting that we've become known for. We send reporters out to get stories that nobody else is telling you, but it also gets you a lot of benefits. Number one, it allows you access to our subscriber only Ask Me Anything sessions with our key reporters and editors where they answer all of your questions. So please do subscribe to listen in to those. The other is, of course, you can write into us in the Your Turn section and your views are then published as an article on the Print website. And the third, of course, is that you get access to our newsletters that are written by our editors about the news of the day, telling you what it is and how it impacts you. So don't miss out on this opportunity. Now coming back to what I was going to talk to you about. With all of its engines only trundling along and not really hitting high gear, the Indian economy is set to see a new persistent Hindu rate of growth of 6.5 to 7% unless some painful reforms are carried out at the central and state levels. The original Hindu rate of growth, which is a term coined by the late economist Raj Krishna in 1978, was meant to capture the persistence of a low rate of growth accompanied by low per capita income. At the time, that low rate of growth was pegged at around 3.5 to 4%. If we were to update this concept for the current time, then the new Hindu rate of growth is far faster than the original one, but it's still wholly inadequate to cater to the needs of the population. It's through faster growth that jobs can be created, incomes increased, and standards of living improved. The reasons why India is not likely to exceed this new Hindu rate is that each of its engines of growth, consumption, investment, exports, and government expenditure are all running at their basic levels. That is, none of them are outperforming and aren't expected to in the medium term. Let's start with consumption. Rural consumption has been subdued ever since the pandemic and only saw a pickup in the first quarter of the current financial year. Economists and ratings agencies expect this recovery to continue through the rest of this year, driven by a normal monsoon. But the thing is, a normal monsoon is no guarantee in any year. The next year might see a poor monsoon with a recurrence of heat waves. Even this year, the impact of heat waves was only somewhat mitigated due to the rains. If the monsoons fail next year, expect rural demand to again plummet. An engine pegged to the vagaries of weather, especially when it's becoming increasingly erratic and extreme, is not going to drive strong overall growth. Urban consumption is following the opposite trajectory. Having surged in the last few years, it is now slumping. As even the Ministry of Finance pointed out in its latest monthly economic report, urban consumption is showing signs of weakness evident in the decline in automobile sales in the first 5 months of the current financial year compared to the same period last year. It's not just cars. As the Print reported last month, urban consumers are opting for smaller packs of fast-moving consumer goods, be it shampoos or biscuits, and are buying less of them. As a result, FMCG companies are feeling the pinch. The reason isn't hard to see. Jobs are scarce and salary growth has not matched inflation in any meaningful way. There's simply less money left for discretionary spending. What this subdued and erratic demand has meant is that companies aren't exactly falling over themselves to invest in new capacity. The RBI's Capacity Utilization Survey, a measure of how extensively companies are using their current capacity, shows the figure has been hovering around the 75 to 76% mark for several quarters now. Ordinarily, when demand is strong, it's at this level of capacity utilization that companies begin investing in fresh capacity. But this isn't happening. After a surge in 2022-23, the private sector's investment intentions, measured by their new project announcements, have again fallen. Research by Axis Bank shows corporate India is using its cash to reduce its debt rather than invest in any big way. This makes sense. With interest rates persistently high, debt has become quite expensive. So, in the absence of a convincing reason to increase their investments, companies are reducing their debt and thereby their interest burden. The manufacturing sector has grown over the last 10 years, certainly, but even the concentrated push of the Make in India campaign hasn't accelerated its growth to a level faster than the growth of the overall economy. In other words, other sectors such as services have outpaced manufacturing without receiving any special attention. Problematically, the manufacturing sector has also not been able to increase its share in overall employment. Employment numbers have been growing and they've been growing faster, but their share in overall employment in the economy has not grown. Nor have exports grown as a share of GDP over the last decade. Yet, if you ask the central government or its supporters about any of this, you will be confronted with much chest thumping about the strong growth of our electronics manufacturing and exports. The World Bank's latest India development update squares this circle. India's exports are relatively concentrated in goods and services that tend not to be labor intensive, it said, adding that the country's share in labor intensive exports has in fact fallen. Here's where the central and state governments need to step in with painful reforms. Yes, electronic good manufacturing has certainly taken off, and this bodes well for India and the centre, which can boast about the likes of Apple increasingly preferring India. But the fact is, this isn't nearly enough. India needs to also concentrate on the relatively unglamorous labor intensive sectors such as textiles, apparel and footwear, for example, for its growth. We can't be docile about the increasing share in these markets that relatively tiny economies like Bangladesh and Vietnam are being able to corner. State governments need to get on board with land and labor reforms, both of which the centre has been trying to push. This might be politically painful, but it must be done. There's no other way companies, which have been burnt repeatedly by India's regulations, often at the state level, will think about really investing in the country. The toughest part in all of this will likely be curbing the bureaucracy's discretionary powers. But this too must happen sooner rather than later. The strong growth the economy saw over the last few years has been driven by central government spending. This was essential during the post-COVID recovery period. But the government has now rightly indicated that it can't indefinitely keep increasing its capital expenditure at breakneck speed. It has deficit targets to meet and other spending to prioritize. A large part of the private investment that had been happening over the last few years was in sectors that stood to benefit from this government push, such as cement, steel and construction. As the government eases up on its capex push, investment by these private companies will also likely slow down. When he postulated his Hindu rate of growth, Krishna said that it was based on the socialist policies of the government at the time and assumed that policymakers were satisfied with 3.5 to 4% growth. As the print has shown before, India is a very large welfare state even now, but we cannot be satisfied with just 6.5 to 7% growth. Bullets are going to have to be bitten, bitter pills swallowed, and hard decisions taken. Short of that, we'll have to reconcile ourselves to this new Hindu rate of growth. But on that note, that's all from me. Thank you for watching.